Thank you for joining us at the 2021 Marketing Outlook meeting. Please take your seats. The program will begin shortly. Is it on? I'm going to do the third. Guests, please be seated. The program will begin momentarily. Guests, please be seated. The program will begin momentarily. Thank you. Please welcome Eddie Pham, founder and CEO of Impact Collective.
Good morning, everyone. You guys look beautiful out there. So excited to have you here in the house. We've been planning this event for 2 years. We never thought it would happen, but it's happening. So give yourself a round of applause for being here this early in the morning. As you heard, my name is Eddie Pham. I'm with Impact Collective. We're an event planning company. We also manage venues. And we launched Capital Turnaround right before the pandemic. And we're just excited to be back doing weddings, conferences, all kinds of celebrations here in the building. And if you see us afterwards, feel free to talk to me. I would love to show you around and give you a tour of the building. As you walked in, you might have seen a sign. Do you guys remember seeing the sign on the left when you walked in? Like it was like painted. Does anyone remember what they saw? It says, "The best is yet to come," is a wall that as soon as you walk in. And on your way out, I recommend taking a picture with that wall because I believe, and we believe, we're about to hear how the best is yet to come. Thank you so much for being here. Have a great event.
Now, please welcome Elliot Ferguson, President and CEO of Destination DC.
You got to have your theme music, right? All right. Good morning. So as Eddie said, it's been a while since we've been planning to get you all out to the Capitol turnaround. And the only song, Eddie, that's in my head all morning long is Total Eclipse of the Heart. Turn around every now and then. All right, you know what I'm talking about. So happy to see you all, and happy to talk about the future of tourism in Washington, D.C. And it's been a ride. And it continues to be one for us as a destination. I remember the last time we actually did this in person was at the Kennedy Center. So I went off and dusted off my shoes that we gave out to Deborah Rutter, the CEO of the Kennedy Center, and to the mayor that were custom painted that really depicts all things Washington, D.C. And I said, you know what, I'm going to take them off the shelf and wear them today because they really showcase our amazing city and our destination. So, today is really about recovery and talking about what's going to be happening in the future. Clearly, we cannot predict the future, but we know for a fact that we are on the right track in terms of recovery as an industry. And that's important to us, and that's why you all are here, the 900-plus members that participate in what we do on a regular basis. We deal with a lot of issues, and sometimes in some of the interviews I've been doing, they continue to talk about where we are today. And I remember when I moved here 20 years ago in December 2001, it was during 9/11. So since then, if you count all the things in which we've had to deal with as an industry, it was 9/11, then anthrax, then sniper, 4 government shutdowns. Keeping my fingers crossed, there will not be a 5th. And insurrection, political unrest, and other things that have been happening, and of course, the pandemic. So we as a destination have had to deal with a lot of things. And sometimes, even if it doesn't happen in Washington, we get those calls saying, I don't know if we're coming to Washington because we're concerned about safety. So as a destination, we have a lot of hurdles in which we have to deal with them in terms of promoting the city. But I am confident in saying to you all that I've got the team in place that will focus on recovery and focus on ways in which we can promote our destination. The calendar in terms of convention business in 2022 still looks good. We've got great conventions that are scheduled, and we're keeping our fingers crossed that will remain in place as we move forward. Equally as much as an amazing team, I'm blessed with a great board of directors that is led by our chairman, Stacy Smith, that I'm going to ask, please stand up, Stacy. Let them know who you are. Stacy, bless her heart, as my grandma would say, has to deal with me on a regular basis. And she really keeps us focused in terms of things in which we have to deal with on a regular basis, along with an amazing board of directors that are also here. And so I'm going to ask the board, those that are here, and if you're at home on Zoom, just stand up and wave at yourself in the mirror. So if you're here in person, please stand up, board members. Awesome. I wear a tie, you don't wear a tie. What's up with that? So, but thank you all for your leadership, as well as others in Washington, D.C. that help us focus on leading our industry and getting us back on track. I want to especially thank City Council and Mayor Bowser for their commitment to our industry, financially and otherwise, especially with the $5 million. Yes, the $5 million that they've given us for fiscal year 2022. So unlike when I walked out on the stage and some of you all clapped haphazardly, when the mayor comes out, I want you all to really, keep your masks on, but let her know that you appreciate all that she continues to do for our industry. It's about being able to get back on track and sell DC in fiscal year 22. And along with the mayor, there are other leaders that have played a role in that, and I'd love to share with you a video representing their interests.
Tourism in the District of Columbia is absolutely essential.
It's so important because it drives people back to our city, allows people to stay in our hotels and frequent our restaurants and enjoy everything that our city has to offer.
But when we think about what happened with the pandemic, we're at the Capitol turnaround right now. Places like this got hit hard because we depend on the vibrancy from a lot of our visitors, our guests that come from around the country.
Leisure and business travel are at the heart of our recovery.
And so we need that tourism to support our local economy, to help put people to work.
What 2021 has taught us from industry, whether it's restaurants, whether it's hotels, it is a contrast to 2020, which gives us hope.
I'm optimistic because the city's so resilient. Our residents are so resilient. Our local entrepreneurs are so resilient. And I am optimistic because I know what DC is, and we want so many people to come and enjoy and experience all that DC has to offer.
We're going to welcome our visitors back to Washington, D.C. We're going to welcome the businesses back to Washington, D.C. We're going to welcome events back to Washington, D.C., concerts back to D.C., and that's what makes us.
I want our visitors to experience the authentic Washington, D.C.
I want visitors to experience Union Market. It's bustling over there with activity and energy.
You can go down to the wharf and you can have amazing meals. You can just have a wonderful time out on the boardwalk to see the boats and the ships and just experience a city on the river. We've got the Capitol Riverfront and the Yards Park and Boardwalk. You got a baseball game, you got a soccer game.
From iconic venues, spaces, and places to visit, to the unique culinary experience that we have, and then all the great places that they can enjoy.
It's the culture, and that's what makes us Washington, D.C.
So it's clear that our stakeholders really understand and value our industry and what we do. From City Council member Kenya McDuffie, who oversees economic development, to Charles Allen, who is over Ward 6, I live in Ward 6, to, of course, Stacy Smith, the chairman of our board, Greg Odell, and others that you'll hear from later today. They understand the importance of this industry as a whole. Now, as we look at recovery, it's really about marketing, but it's also about benchmarking and things in which we're focusing on. And the key data is pretty crucial to us. It tells us right now we had about 13.3 million visitors last year in Washington, and that's down over nearly 50% from 2019. The good news is the forecast for this year is that we're pacing to about 16 million visitors in 2021, up 23% from last year. And in 2022, keeping our fingers crossed, we'll see over 20 million domestic visitors come to Washington, which is about 87% of where we were before the pandemic. And you might be wondering exactly what are consumers saying and how do they feel about traveling. And overall, there's a lot of positive consumer sentiment about getting back on the road. However, every single time there's a new variant or something in which we have to deal with, there is more apprehension. Overall, they're optimistic, and that's what we're banking on as we look at the future. Now, there are certain things in which we can control, and there's a lot that we can't, and we all know what those things are. I think as a city, DC continues to remain an attractive destination for so many folks and developers. And I see the Deputy Mayor of Economic Development, John Felcecchio, joined us, and he really leads the charge in terms of new development in the city. We thank you for all that you're doing for Washington, D.C. and our industry and really focusing on hospitality as a board member for Events D.C. I'm not one to say give people a round of applause, but this guy does deserve a round of applause for all of his hard work, so thank you, sir. You know, as you're looking at the screen, there's over $10.3 billion in development happening in Washington, D.C., which is a part of that investment. It includes new and ongoing infrastructure changes in which we'll be able to promote in the future and major developments that are happening in the city. There are also new attractions on the National Mall and new attractions that are also getting an update that are attractive to individuals. Beyond that, we work with Solomon Keene with the Hotel Association, and he focuses on all things tied to making sure that our hotels are safe and secure and solvent. In the city, we have 8 new rebrands of hotels that are happening and will open in 2021. There are 5,800 rooms and 29 new hotels in the pipeline. So if you're a hotelier in the room, I know what you're thinking. But the goal for us is to continue to bring more people to the city so that we'll continue to see that occupancy grow up. The key thing for us is the diversity of our product, which when I moved here 20 years ago, that's not quite what we had, and that's where we're going as a destination so that we can keep the convention center full, booking different types of business in those buildings as well as individual hotels. Now, we also recognize the fact that restaurants have taken a huge hit over the last year plus. We work closely with the Restaurant Association and Kathy Hollinger, who plays an active role in making sure that restaurants are taken care of and identify the importance of the restaurant scene. They've all been severely impacted, but the good news is that the culinary scene in Washington has never been stronger. And it's not simply because I'm saying it, but it's also because in 2017 we received our first Michelin guide, and when Michelin says you're good and you have a great culinary scene, then you're good. Now, for us as a destination, although we've seen a lot of closings in Washington, D.C., we're seeing a lot of new openings of restaurants, including a new food halls around the city, waterfront dining, and more. So we'll be able to talk about a lot of that on our website moving forward. Now, beyond that, we look at anniversaries as a way to attract folks back to Washington as a destination. Several people come, and then they say, well, I've been, so what's new? And that's what we're focusing on with some of the new and exciting ways in which we're promoting the city. Anniversaries such as the Smithsonian's 175th, the Kennedy Center's celebration of 50 years, the Emancipation Day, and several others are things in which we're going to be focusing on and attracting people to the city. And for us, it's about celebrating things that we didn't experience last year, which unfortunately are several things. And these are ways in which we're going to promote Washington to those that are looking at getting on the road and coming to our city. We're happy to hear that industries that have been closed for a long time are reopening and coming back stronger than ever. For example, we love the theater scene in Washington, and we know that for a fact that outside of New York, we have one of the largest theater scenes in the United States with over 6,000 theater companies, 6,000 person theater community that rivals any in the country. And we're paying close attention to shows that are coming back online. My wife and I were watching the Tonys this weekend, and we're excited about what's happening on Broadway, and we recognize that some of those things will also resonate in Washington, D.C. And those things are what we'll be focusing on Washington.org. We'll also focus on live music, indoors and outdoors, as that continues to see a resurgence, and people are really willing to get out there again, as well as signature events that are coming back online. Capitol Pride, National Cherry Blossom Festival, and I'm proud to be a member of the DC Jazz Festival and had the opportunity to see a lot of major events throughout Washington in the last few weeks ago. So we're excited about those opportunities for folks to come back to the city. And these events, as well as several others, are how we market our city, be it the 8th Street Festival or other things that perhaps will attract folks to our city. And our marketing and communications team plays a huge role in how we focus on those events. The key thing for us in 2020 was the fact that with no one visiting or a limited number of people visiting the city, that eroded our opportunity to be able to promote Washington as a destination. It's one of those things where I've got no money to do what we want to do. And the marketing and communications team really stepped up and helped us to focus on ways in which we can do that. But that was also augmented by Events DC and their board of directors giving us an additional $3 million last year to promote Washington when we did not have those dollars. So those dollars gave us the opportunity to do more with very little, even though we were closed, because people were still coming out and visiting. One thing about Washington is that monuments, memorials are a great way to visit and still socially distance, and that's what we were promoting. But because of those $3 million, and of course the mayor's backing of the campaign, we were able to do something unique and focus on a new campaign called Experience DC. And you can see that with that campaign, the mayor kicked it off at Ben's Chili Bowl. We love Ben's Chili Bowl. And we were able to talk about the campaign itself. And it's an extension of our Discover the Real DC campaign, which has been around for a couple of years, but really focuses on what we know that people don't think about when they come to Washington. Monuments, memorials, and museums, we love them, but we want them to also focus on other ways in which they can enjoy DC as a destination. So we deal with a perception problem on a regular basis. But the Experience DC campaign gives us a chance to highlight the things in which we love about our city. Now for us, we have 50 million people that live within 4 hours of Washington. So that was our market, as people weren't necessarily willing to get on a plane maybe 6 or 8 months ago, even though that's changing now. But with 50 million people within 4 hours of Washington, that was a great opportunity for us to really go after a market that will be able to come to Washington, drive, and enjoy our city. And we want to share with you the commercial in which we did, highlighting the campaign itself.
That place is Washington, but you haven't experienced DC. We are the capital of these United States and proud of it, but we're also the capital of that beat, of the last call half smoked. With more museums per square mile than any place in the country, these monuments will change you. But this city is no postcard. We're the capital of food, art, music, and don't stop now. There's more to see. You know Washington. Now experience DC.
Now, I'm proud of that campaign for a lot of reasons. And one is, usually in the city, you automatically think, well, people automatically want to come to Washington. And though people tend to look at DC through the lens of coming for history and culture, perhaps they don't look at our neighborhoods and the uniqueness of our destination above and beyond that. And that's what the Experience DC campaign continues to do. Started with DC Cool, continue with the Discover the Real DC, and now Experience DC. And the initial results have been really positive for us. 24 million engagements of individuals that are looking at ways to get out and travel again and going to our website. And the data track tells us consumer behavior shows that the research, bookings, and arrivals have consistently increased, which is exactly what we want. So far, we've seen a 35% increase of traffic to washington.org, our website. And last month alone, advertising drove 20% more traffic to our website. Now, it's not just about our website, but let's face it. People go to the website to find out what there is to see and do in our destination, and we're excited that we saw that uptick in traffic because that ultimately means people want to come to Washington. Now, we target specific individuals or groups of folks in which we think want to get out and travel again. Family travelers, foodies, and those interested in arts, theater, sports, and American history. And the creative is slightly different for each of those markets. And also, as we're looking at international communities that live in the United States and the opportunity for international in the future, we focused on ways in which we can attract them by putting these, creating Spanish and Mandarin versions of the videos, which I'd like to share with you right at this moment.
Esto es DC, donde se toman decisiones importantes, como cuál museo visitar primero y a dónde vamos después. Ya conoce Washington, ahora explora DC.
This is DC, where important decisions are made, like which monument to see first and where are we going next. You know Washington. Now experience DC.
Now, these videos have been highly effective in terms of getting folks interested in coming back to the district, as every city in the United States is doing the exact same thing. Quite frankly, every city globally is trying to get market share. And consumers want to interact with our videos, especially on social media, which we've all had a chance to learn a lot about in the last 19 months, either participating or watching it. Before we had an ad budget, this was the only way in which we can get out to consumers over the last 18 months. This year, we've seen the highest engagement yet, including pre-COVID numbers. And for clarity, as we're looking at this, we're also being as creative as we possibly can to reach consumers. So even TikTok is out there for us. Now, I guarantee you won't see me on an ad or a TikTok doing any of the latest dances, even though I can. And if you stay afterwards, I'll show you what I can do. But clearly, that was a unique and interesting way to get people engaged. We did launch our own Visit DC TikTok this year, and I drew the line at dancing. I did that once, and I'm never doing it again for Destination DC. So Instagram Reels is another way in which we were highlighting ways in which people can enjoy the city, from the Cherry Blossom Festivals to our monuments to the 4th of July fireworks, which we were excited that we were able to do an actual fireworks event this year. And what I love about these videos is that they're really authentic and they inspire people to come back and travel. Now, for us, public relations played a huge role in ways in which we can attract folks to the city. We earned over $130 million in advertising equivalency through our PR efforts. So the team was busy, and because they were busy, that meant I was extremely busy. From doing interviews on diversity, equity, and inclusion, tourism recovery, what's new in DC, and also speaking on behalf of the U.S. Travel Association for the last 2 years. Hopefully, I won't be being interviewed later today about government shutdowns, so if you know people in the Capitol Hill, make sure that does not happen, because that's also detrimental as we look at our future. In any given week, readers in our top markets are reminded about traveling to Washington, D.C., and also we've been working really closely not only with the leisure publications, but also with trade publications as we focus on recovery. USAE continues to be one of the organizations and publications that our industry really prides itself on being a part of. There are other cities in the U.S. that says, why are you all always in USAE? Perhaps it's because they're headquartered in our backyard and we have a great relationship with them. And I did want to take a moment to pause and recognize the contribution that Ann Heller, the co-founder of USAE, has made in our industry. Unfortunately, Ann passed away earlier this month. And even up to the end, Ann was that person that would call and say, yeah, I hear that you're doing something on your campaign, Elliot. I'm like, how do you know this? Am I bugged? What's going on? But Ann was that person that you loved and feared about what she was going to put in a publication. But she loved DC. She loved working with our team, and she really was a stalwart for our industry for such a long time. So between she and her husband, Ross Heller, they really put DC on the map within our industry, specifically in the convention perspective, and Ann will truly be missed. Now, our website, as I referenced, is and has been our primary way in which we promoted DC as a destination. The only shining spot in terms of 2020 marketing was the fact that we were able to relaunch Washington.org last year. And consumers have said they find it much easier to navigate, and headliner pieces show video and photography drawing consumers deeper into our site. The research strategy has also helped with more unique visitors, and we're adding new content, including focus on accessible travel, coming soon, and how we showcase diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I'm really proud that the team focused on a section of our website that is called the DEI District. Now people can learn more about things that perhaps we didn't promote before, like protest tourism and what role DC has played, civil rights landmarks, and information on minority-owned businesses in the DC community, and of course about how diverse DC is as an international destination. The key thing with this is that it's really for all audiences. And I've done several interviews, especially when the African American Museum opened, and folks said, isn't that great for your community, being a black person? I'm like, absolutely, but it's an international museum that we want to welcome all folks to understand the importance of the black community and the economics of the United States as a whole. I'm very proud of this section of our website, and I hope that you all will take some time to check it out, because folks are looking at it and finding ways to enjoy DC from a different perspective. Now I'm going to turn to meetings, conventions, and convention services. Meetings are returning, which is a good sign for us. It's almost like that Paula Abdul song, one step forward, two steps back. As soon as we think we're getting back on track, there's something like a variant that might slow us down. As we're looking at promoting our destination, I love when I see hotels and restaurants, talking about how great the food is and how amazing the rooms are. But it's equally important to really talk about your safety standards as people are looking at traveling again. That's going to play a huge role in terms of being able to get back on track. Just like today, it was important that every single person that attended in person was vaccinated or at least tested negative for COVID. And that's reoccurring as we've been traveling again. I've attended about 14 different industry shows in the last 8 months, and they're either requiring both, and in some cases, doing testing right on site because people need to feel very comfortable about getting back on the road. That's what we're focusing on as an industry. That's what we're talking about in terms of groups coming back to Washington, D.C., and that's what Events DC is focusing on as they're looking at hosting groups in their various venues around the city. They're actually leading the industry in terms of protocol, which is the reason why we're seeing groups return to Washington. I've asked Greg through video to share some of the things in which they're doing.
Safety and health really is our highest priority at the convention center. We want to make sure all of our attendees are safe, but also make sure all of our employees are safe. And so we've invested a lot in different technologies. We have temperature controls, we have air filtration systems, we also have sanitary processes in place, and so we want to give everybody that comfort when they come into our building.
So at this point, it's what he said. It's really about making sure that groups are comfortable coming back to Washington and using the convention center and making sure they know what's in place for those groups that are coming back. August, who would have thought August would be the strongest convention month in our fiscal year? We were happy to have Otakon and, yeah, I know, right? That does. For the record, that applause was started by the team at Events DC that's sitting right here. So we hosted Otakon and AwesomeCon, and they experienced our safety measures firsthand. You know, these groups are important to us, especially because they meet in August, but August business, it's like, oh yeah, you know, we want the medical groups and we want all of that business. But, you know, who would have thought that wearing a cape would have been the most important aspect of groups coming back to Washington? And that's what AwesomeCon brought us in August. We were excited about them committing to Washington, D.C., not just this year, but in the future. And we're also excited about other groups that are coming in the next 3 months or the next few months of this annual year. They'll be wearing camo, 3-piece suits and scrubs, as they'll be a little different, but we're excited about the fact that they're returning. Army normally brings thousands of people to the city, and we know that they're on point and on track to also have a strong attendance, even in a COVID environment. And they understand the importance of meeting in person, and they wanted to meet in Washington. So Brigadier Jack Haley wanted to share with you some of his insights about returning to Washington, D.C.
Good afternoon. I'm Jack Haley, Vice President, Membership and Meetings at AUSA. Since 1950, AUSA has been a nonprofit educational and professional development association serving America's Army and supporters of a strong national defense. AUSA provides a voice for the Army, supports the soldier, and honors those who have served in order to advance the security of our nation. Our national headquarters is located right outside Washington in Arlington, Virginia, and every fall, we hold an annual meeting and exposition in Washington, D.C. We are excited to play a role in the convention recovery in our own backyard, and this year look forward to welcoming back our members, attendees, and exhibitors to Washington. We know the convention recovery helps overall economic growth for the city. The business impacts on hotels, restaurants, and transportation are significant, and we're glad to help.
Now, we're excited that AUSA is coming back to Washington, D.C., and you'll see them all throughout the city, which is great. And in addition to the 3 groups that are coming back, we are excited about the calendar year 2022 in terms of conventions. Usually in any given year, we have about 22 or more citywides, and we're always focusing on bringing more to the city. Next year, we have 20 on the books. We had 2 that have canceled, unfortunately, but these 20 are still in place to come to Washington. I see some of you taking pictures of some of these slides. Just remember, all of this information will be on the extranet and accessible to you after this. So you can take pictures of me if you like, but you'll get this later on. So, you know, 20 citywides in 2022 is not a bad thing, especially as we look at the last couple of years. We're continuously focusing on bringing groups back in the future. So as we look at 2023 and beyond, you see the numbers continue to move in a positive direction. Now, the good news about what you're seeing is that I mentioned 22 is a strong year, is that we still have a lot of tentatives on the books in terms of bringing those larger congresses and meetings to the convention center, but we're also seeing an uptick in meetings that 10 rooms or larger that are wanting to come back to Washington, D.C. So the momentum is there. Our offices reopened July 6th. I see the buzz from the team as they're coming back into the office on a regular basis, and we're responding to several leads all the time. Now, one of the things as a DMO, Destination Management Organization, is that we tend to focus on bringing groups to the city, talking about how great we are, about our great infrastructure, and then they're left on their own to do their planning. Well, one thing that I pride the Convention Sales and Services team on doing with Events DC and others is focusing on ways in which we can become more interactive with these groups. So a couple of things we've talked about a few years ago is remaining connected. And that continues to evolve as we focus on promoting DC as a destination. Connectivity is extremely important, and things like Connected Capital give us an opportunity to focus on ways in which leaders and experts that are only found in Washington, D.C. can play a major role in those groups that are looking at coming, either booked groups or those that are thinking about coming to Washington, D.C. in industries such as tech, medical, sustainability, and others. We have an amazing marketing piece we see it globally that talks about connected capital in Washington, D.C., because we focus not only on domestic groups, but also international groups. Beyond that, Connected Campus is also another way in which we can look at those larger venues in the city, but also look at unique spaces that are within close proximity that groups probably never think about because they want to do everything in the convention center or in a hotel. So we're now looking at space around the convention center and or around other major venues in the city and saying, why don't you use this arts theater or art studio for a breakout or other things that are within close walking distance of the convention center or whatever venue they're using. Connected Campus is about DC's venues and walkability, which is extremely important, but Connected Community is a way in which we're working with groups on their social impact. So meetings in DC have a positive long-term effect. So as we look at social impact, of course, we're all worried and concerned and focusing on that on a regular basis. Last week, I was at Skift in New York, and they asked a question about sustainability. And, as a nation, we get like a C- in terms of what we're doing compared to other international destinations. And I was on a panel with others that represent other international cities. And so it's outstanding what they're doing, but it's also something that the Bowser administration is focusing on, and we're working with them on that. So we've asked Alexis Squire, Chief Service Officer of Volunteerism and Partnerships, to share what they're doing and how we're working with them.
Is the central hub within the mayor's office that connects people to purpose. We are always about multi-sector partnership and leveraging civic activation through service and collaboration. There's so many opportunities for our visitors to have a lasting impact on our residents and communities, especially our most vulnerable needs. And so whether it's through a food bank or whether they're doing a community project, a cleanup project, or a beautification of a school, these are small acts that have really major impact.
So as you can see, we're focusing on ways in which we can bring sustainability to groups. And I'll challenge each of you, because what's happening now with groups is they're asking a couple questions. What are your policies as it pertains to DEI? How are you positioned as an organization, and how are you promoting yourselves? And then what is your sustainability plan? In our office, we think about it all the time. We have folks that are on our team that are questioning and challenging what we're doing with sustainability because it's extremely important. So I encourage you to do the same thing, because it's also in a lot of RFPs as their groups are looking at coming to Washington or using your venues. So above and beyond that, when it comes to business, international continues to remain a bright spot for us. During the height of the pandemic, we were booking about 87,000 room nights each year. See how I rounded that up? Because we've been in the international market for over 10 years, 10 plus years in terms of bringing that group business to the city. With that, we do a similar thing as we do with Connected Campus and Connected Capital, and we have an ambassador circle. And these are international and domestic folks that really focus on ways in which DC can be a more attractive destination, from sustainability to how we attract international groups, making it easier for them to come into Washington. It's important that we go after this business because we understand the impact economically of the international visitor, and perhaps they'll bring their families. They stay longer and spend more. So we will continue to focus on that with Events DC, which, by the way, happens to fund our efforts in the international meetings market. Now, beyond booking the business, it's important that we service the business. We want to make sure that groups know that we want them to come to Washington, D.C., but we want them to have an amazing experience, and that's what we focus on with convention services. So you see that guy doing that thing right there? He's sitting right there in the front. He used to work at Destination D.C. So it's about focusing on the customer to make sure that not only the planners are having a good experience, but the attendees are as well. So there are there are various safety measures that are in place that are tied to those groups that are coming in that I talked about earlier. And the key for us is remaining transparent and making sure that those groups have an amazing experience when they're in Washington. You all were greeted by our red coats, and they've had a 19-month vacation, unfortunately, but they're coming back online because they're the first line of welcome for groups that are coming to the convention center or to individual hotels. So we're excited to be able to have that staff in place to welcome groups when they're coming into the city. And lastly, we're in the business of face-to-face meetings. So for us, I referenced earlier, I've been on the road quite a bit. My wife will tell you that the last 18 days I've been out doing what I love, in addition to loving her, of course. She's sitting in the front row, and promoting our city. But above and beyond that, the return on investment is tied to getting out there. So we attended PCMA's EduCon recently, and I'm really excited that the team came back with leads and opportunities for us to book business in the future. And in November, I was going to say next month, but actually in November, we'll be back at IMEX, which will be in Vegas, which is usually held in Frankfurt and in Vegas. And this will be a great opportunity to welcome some of those international visitors as the borders reopen the 1st of November to the U.S. and, of course, for us to be able to promote D.C. as a destination. Now, as we think about markets, we have been focusing on tourism, the leisure market, because when meetings weren't happening, we knew that we had a chance to, that 50 million people that live within 4 hours of Washington, D.C. So we've been playing a major role in focusing on bringing that the domestic market back to Washington, D.C. We appreciate meetings. We understand the return on investment. But right now, it's all about who's coming now, be it the Women's March that's coming this weekend or other activities that are coming into the city. Rethinking that approach has been extremely important to us, and we've been focusing on all types of groups, especially youth travel, because it's coming back. And, I always joke, and I kind of mean it, but, the return on investment for youth, they come into the city, they do the free things, and perhaps the return on investment is not that great. And I say that jokingly because we know that sometimes that return on investment is long-term, because they come back and they say, I remember when I came to DC when I was in the 8th grade. And they come back 10 years later, they bring a larger family, and they spend more money. So student groups remain important, and we remain more engaged than ever. We've been working with tour operators and others in terms of focusing on itineraries that are key to them in terms of promoting DC. STEM is a big deal and has been for a long time, but that's what they're asking for when they're coming to Washington, D.C. And Black history, probably now more than ever, has been a huge reason as to why folks want to travel and these groups want to come to Washington, D.C. We have new animated videos about Black history and Earth Day showcasing D.C. assets for students. And there's a special version for the Student Youth Travel Association, headquartered right here in Washington, D.C., that will be holding their annual convention here next year. So I will tell you, I go to great lengths on behalf of this industry to promote DC and student youth travel. Let me show you what we're talking about. Hi, I'm Elliot Ferguson, President and CEO of Destination DC. I can't wait to see you all live and in person at CITA 2022 in my hometown, Washington, DC. Don't clap, don't clap. They got the hair wrong, they got the pants wrong, the glasses wrong, but you get the point. We do all kinds of fun things for our student youth, and I go that extra mile, so you're welcome, team. So, moving from students, which remain important, we also focus on other opportunities that are coming our way. Athletes, sporting events, and leads of that nature have returned at a faster clip than other opportunities. We're carrying the momentum with major bids pending on our partners, including Events DC, Cap One Arena, Monumental Sports, DC United, and the Washington football team. And you remember way, way, way back in 2019 when the Mystics won the Women's National Championship, and we were supposed to celebrate in 2020, and we never did. We haven't forgotten the Mystics because they are our latest champions in Washington, D.C., and we love the fact that they brought that championship back to Washington and, of course, the new entertainment and sports arena. We also have welcomed tennis back to the city with the City Open. Yes, Rafa Nadal, where is Robin McLean? Yes. She thinks he loves her as much as she loves him. But anyway, we'll talk about that later. But we're excited that the City Open came back. I love tennis. I love it with a passion. And the fact that it came back to the city with major stars was a big deal. We're excited about the FIFA Cup for 2026. We're playing an active role along with a lot of East Coast cities and bringing a portion of that to Washington. And we hope to hear more about that next spring as to what we will actually be able to host. And in July, Events DC and partners announced that USA Rugby, our USA team, will be playing the New Zealand All Blacks next month in Maryland. But of course, 40,000 attendees, 16,000 rooms in Washington, D.C. So we're really excited about that opportunity. And the Kiwis, the nickname for folks from New Zealand, won't be able to attend for obvious reasons, perhaps because it's going to be in the month of October and international can't return until November. We are still we're going to be impacted positively by the global community that lives in the United States that are going to want to come to Washington and amplify the message and attend those games. And it's a true example of how we've been able to stay engaged with overseas markets. Even though they can't attend, we've been focusing on international with our reps from around the country. I was just at USA Travel Association's IPW a couple of weeks ago, and we did receive the welcome message about vaccinated overseas travelers could return back to the United States this November, which, no better time than during U.S. Travel's IPW to announce this. And so we were extremely thrilled to hear this news, but each country has its own unique requirements. So don't expect on November 2nd to see a massive influx of folks from around the world. Yes, we will see increases, but it will be more gradual and not immediate. And that's for reasons such as if you're traveling from China outside of that country, you have to go back and quarantine for 2 weeks. And that is unlikely for those to travel outside of China for a while until that criteria changes. And the criteria is different all over the globe. So we're very optimistic about travel returning, but now we have to focus on things like visas, the image of the U.S. as a destination, and other variables that are important to returning those international visitors. Customers that were actually at IPW, which there were about 450, and Tori can confirm that when she's up later, gave us positive feedback about the news and about the interest of the global community returning to the United States. Now, we didn't have all the funds to promote and actually engage our international reps last year, but actually some of them said, I know you can't pay us right now, but we still want to rep DC, and we want to be out there focusing on ways in which we can to get back online. And that's what I call job security for them. But it was good that they decided to do that, and it worked in our advantage. And now we're in a position where we're able to actually financially position them to promote DC as a destination. And we wanted to share with you from those representatives from all over the globe some of the things you all should know about each market as we go back online in terms of international visitation.
We in the German-speaking countries are all waiting for the time that borders are open again. We know from our tour operator partners that many customers have rebooked their trips to the US instead of canceling. For example, a mid-sized tour operator in Switzerland has over 20,000 requests on hold for travel to the US, which will turn into bookings as soon as the American borders reopen. Once this happens, we will see especially individuals and couples traveling over Atlantic, and probably not too many families. Washington, D.C. as travel destination will benefit from an already strong existing flight schedule with 5 daily non-stop flights from our region to Dallas. And of course, last-minute bookings will become more common, especially in the first months after the international reopening, as people are really eager to travel.
Chinese travelers still want to experience DC's icons as a capital city, including world-class museums. There will be a longer booking window due to the visa and tickets booking process. Travel agencies want to book outbound overseas travel as soon as possible, and the demand will be high.
French travelers will have larger budgets, and millennials and retirees will likely be first to book. While the length of trip to the US will stay the same, travelers will focus on visiting only one destination. The French are comforted by DC's approach to COVID, especially in comparison to some other US destinations.
Safety becomes synonymous with luxury in the Indian market. People are willing to pay more for private experiences and private travel so as to avoid lines and crowds. DC appeals to all travel segments, including students, families, as well as MICE. As a destination, DC is perceived to be cost-effective with high value for money.
UK travellers are increasing their length of stay and likely travelling with multiple generations. More consumers are using travel agents for information, reassurance and flexible terms, which has boosted confidence for 2022 trips. Brits are interested in DC's cultural and racial inclusivity, and they view DC as a safe and familiar destination.
Aussies and Kiwis are traditionally high-value travelers, and we've actually seen increased travel savings caused by the pandemic. This is going to cause an increased length of stay and more spend per trip when they get back to DC. We're also seeing a much shorter booking window than we would traditionally from this market. New leadership in the White House is favorable. DC has stood out for its leadership surrounding social justice, Black Lives Matter, as well as its response to COVID-19 over the last 18 months, all appreciated by future travelers from down under. Go Team DC.
And now that we have a timeline for the international market to return, it's important that we are back out in those markets focusing on promoting DC as a destination. We'll take our first international trip in October at attending Brand USA's Travel Week in Europe, Travel Week Europe in London. And the team has really been hard at work, even during the pandemic, focusing on ways in which we can continue those that influence travel to the United States and specifically to Washington. Travel agent programs have been ongoing in 3 different languages, all over, with our team talking to these individuals about DC as a destination, and we've educated over 1,000 travel agents on the importance of travel to the United States. And sometimes when we talk about travel and meeting with travel agencies, the mayor just walked in, and I thought about our trip to China when we met with C-Trip. The first time we went to see them, I think they had about 14,000 employees. And a year or so later, they were up to about 19,000 employees. Groups like C-Trip and others help influence travel throughout the globe. And they're the ones that basically will say to a Chinese traveler, go to the United States, go to Washington, D.C. It's more than what you think. And that's why we want to focus on that opportunity to really talk to those agents that are talking and influencing those individuals to travel. We work closely with organizations like the Airports Authority and United Airlines in ways in which we can promote stays in Washington, D.C. Yes, people fly internationally. Perhaps they do a layover at Dulles International Airport. But what can we do to influence them to physically get off the plane and stay in Washington, D.C.? So as a region, we've been working with hotels and with United Airlines to encourage a 1 or 2 night stayover. So these individuals will deplane, stay in Washington or the region, and hopefully the first quarter of next year, take the Silver Line from the airport to Washington, D.C. and enjoy the city. The goal for us is for them to say, well, yes, I was planning to come to the United States and go elsewhere, but because I stayed in Washington, I was engaged and looked at D.C. through a different lens, which is important to us. For us, Visitor Services has been one of the teams that has been the most active. They've been navigating all the questions that we've been receiving either on our chat bot or on our phone, our 800 number, about what there is to see and do in Washington, D.C. And I will tell you, since they've been back in the office July 6th, I've been listening to those questions and the messaging in which they've been giving. And it's been about security, it's been about safety, it's been about what's been open. I can assure you that in the next couple of days, keeping our fingers crossed that we don't have to deal with a shutdown, but that'll be the next line of questions. What can we do? We're already planned to come to Washington. I'm proud of this team and how they've been able to influence individuals to travel to Washington, even during these trying times. Now, we recognize the importance of heads in beds and butts in seats, but we can't do it without partners like you all. So our Partnerships and Alliances team plays a huge role in making sure that you all are taken care of on a regular basis. I want to, again, thank the mayor and Events DC for giving us the financial wherewithal to go out and promote DC last year and in 2022. And the key thing, as I referenced earlier, all this information is going to be on the extranet. You have an account manager, they're here. If you're members of this organization, you'll have a chance to talk to them about how you're positioned either in our official visitors guide, event planning guide, and of course on our website. Washington.org is the site that people are going to in terms of what there is to see and do in Washington. And it's up to you all to position your website, your portion of the website, to talk about all the great things you're doing and how folks can enjoy either your restaurant, your attraction, or your hotel. As well as deals that perhaps you're offering as we go into the softer period with the winter. We continue to have successful membership-based events during the pandemic, and fortunately, just like this event, with safety measures, we'll continue to do these events in the future. I think those that are, it's almost like church, you all have heard me say it before. It's not the people that are here, it's the people that are not here that need to hear this message. But being a member of Destination DC gives you the wherewithal to attract individuals to your particular destination, your venue, your event, or what have you. But being engaged is the only way in which it happens. Now, switching gears, I do want to talk about the American Experience Foundation. You know, the mayor and others, we focus on economic development. That's why you all are members. But my passion is, what are we doing to give back to the community? The foundation was founded right after 9/11 for groups that wanted, or organizations that wanted to give us money to promote DC. But then it transitioned into something that I call a passion project, and that's giving back to kids. It's our 501c3, and it's something we do not only with local kids, but with kids internationally. Now, think about teaching kids. I know some of you have actually had to endure this over the last few months, for 6 weeks on Zoom during a summer program. That's what we did, in addition, working with Chancellor Farabee and the DC Public School System, as well as the Department of Employment Services, to really focus on ways in which we can get kids engaged in our industry. And we're talking high school kids. I was on a couple of those Zooms, and I would just fold my arms and say, I'm not going to talk to you until I see your face, because everybody's dark. And then they'd all eventually come on, and we actually had great conversation. We partnered with the Smithsonian and others, and we're proud of the positive feedback that we received from DC Public School System and others in terms of what we were able to accomplish. We had one of our own interns, Jasmine Morant, who won the 2021 Urban Alliance Intern Award for the year, which we're really excited for her as she's graduated and now is going off to college. And in May, we awarded 8 scholarships to high school students. And since 2015, we've awarded over $92,000 in scholarships to kids that are going off to university to study hospitality. So we're proud of that, and I think the best is yet to come. Now, as you can tell, we really haven't stopped in terms of what we've been doing to promote DC as a destination. In the long run, working with students all over the city helps ensure communities are not left behind, but also we're focusing on other things that are tied specifically to promoting DC as a destination. As we look at our industry, there is a lack of representation in so many different ways in terms of leadership. There are 700 destination management organizations such as DDC around the US, and there are 10 that are led by people of color. So clearly, as you think about that dynamic, there's a lot of work in which we need to do in terms of getting back on track. In addition to promoting DC as a destination, I have been focusing on diversity, equity, and inclusion, and I was inspired by Deputy Mayor Falcecchio and the mayor in terms of the Black Lives Matter signage on 16th Street, which was amazing, but it also was copied by other cities around the globe as we focus on this important issue. You hear a lot about our priorities in terms of promoting our destination, but this is also one of the priorities that we have in terms of diversity, equity, and inclusion, and the unique diversity of our city as a destination. We're excited that the mayor has focused on the DC is Open for Business campaign to visitors, and we appreciate all the work that she and Deputy Mayor Falcecchio has been doing on behalf of our industry. You saw the Ben's Chili Bowl kickoff of the experience, The Real DC, and she's committed and continues to commit dollars to Washington and to our industry and to Destination DC to promote DC as a destination. So do you remember what I said to you before she came in the room? Yeah? I need positive reinforcement. You remember? Come on. Not yet, not yet. So I just wanted to make sure you were still paying attention. So we are fortunate to have our own mayor, the head cheerleader for our industry, here with us this morning. And at this time, I'd love you all to welcome Mayor Bowser to the stage.
Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
I am just delighted to be here with you this morning, and I want to thank Elliot Ferguson and the entire team at Destination DC. Give them a big round of applause. I know I can say for sure for myself and DC government that this has been 18 months like no other 18 months, and I know I can say that for the travel industry. So I want to thank you for sticking with us, hanging in there, continuing to focus on our fabulous destination and getting people traveling again. Because I can see the light at the end of the tunnel. I've heard some of the outlook, and I feel good about that outlook, as you should. You should also know that we've been working very hard over these last 18 months so the DC that people are re-engaging and coming back to travel. They're going to find even more things to do and see, more places to stay, and certainly more people to meet. So I'm delighted to be here. We have, and I don't have to tell you this, before the pandemic hit, over 25 million visitors coming to Washington, D.C. And those visitors spent $8 billion in our city that supported 80,000 jobs. I frequently say, sometimes when we talk about travel and hospitality, it sounds like fun and games. But those are real jobs, real dollars, and real people. And the investment that travelers and meeting goers and conference goers make in our city each time helps us to support everything else that makes our city great, like transforming our public schools and creating opportunities for more Washingtonians and having one of the most robust investments in affordable housing anywhere in the United States of America. We know that many of the jobs that we create in leisure and hospitality are good-paying career jobs as well that will allow Washingtonians that Elliot is training in these programs to have a career for the rest of their lives. And so I couldn't be more proud of all of the industry gathered here and throughout DC who really innovated and pivoted and found a way to keep people employed and keep people on their payroll and are thinking creatively about how people are going to come back. My team at DC government, I'm also tremendously proud of. I think you've already heard from Deputy Mayor Falcecchio and his team, because we were able to create with our local dollars and with some federal emergency funds, relief programs that really made a difference, including $155 million in relief and recovery dollars for local businesses. I'm also proud to say that we're united in our city on this issue. Sometimes when people think of DC, they think about fights all the time or political arguments. There is no argument about how we are going to invest in bringing hospitality and keeping our sector robust. I am also very grateful that industry has been able to adapt as we have to evolving public health guidance, including helping us focus on getting people vaccinated, which continues to be the only way that we're going to get over this pandemic, but also continuing to follow guidance around masks, especially in our indoor settings. We have discovered during this pandemic not all has been bad. Some lessons learned, for example, are giving us new destinations, like 350 streeteries that are now open across DC. And that's a good thing. We've also found a way to loosen up, or shall I say, make more contemporary our alcohol laws, which are allowing more opportunities for entertainment. Those are not the only reasons we're optimistic about our comeback, but let's face it, you know, people like to have fun. And then when you go around DC even now, you will see, even in probably places before the pandemic, are really activated by people who are going out to dinner, having lunch, having brunch, and enjoying their friends. This last couple of weeks has also demonstrated how pent up the demand is for fun. We have been out with a number of our local festivals, which we have found more ways to support financially to help them come back, including one that the district puts on called Art All Night. And Art All Night is literally that. For 2 days across all 8 wards, artists and makers demonstrated to the public what they do and how much they've missed seeing their fans and each other. From having go-go bands at our central library to dancers and painters in our new Central Park, that is Franklin Park, right in the heart of downtown DC, to experiencing food from wonderful makers across the city. We just had an entirely good time with Art All Night, but it showed me something important, that DC residents are ready to get out, see each other, and how much they have missed live music and live performance and the things that make life colorful. And that is the same is true for travel. I know our residents are different than people from around the world who are eager to get back to those experiences. So working with Elliot and his team, I'm happy to hear that there's going to be an international trip to promote our wonderful destination. We spend, and I spend a lot of time in my office as well, making sure that the environment is good here for people to come back, including in the new nonstop flights that connect destinations from around the world to Washington, D.C. Earlier this year, we launched the Experience DC marketing campaign to get people near and far back to Washington. And we know, and I've heard from Elliot, that the federal government is preparing to adjust our international travel restrictions to allow more fully vaccinated travelers back to the U.S. So again, we see that you play a role in public health. And that role is letting people know that there's more open to them around the world with vaccination. We also have locally in our toolbox, and Elliot has already mentioned how much the district wants to be behind the recovery We know that that takes telling our story. No sense in keeping Washington, D.C. a secret, our great destinations, but also, and I think I've heard on this theme today, how focused we've been on saving lives in our city, making sure that we have a robust public health system that has kept people safe and out of the hospital, that we've met our national vaccine benchmarks, and we take the health of our residents and visitors very seriously. We know that that's a selling point to people as well. But we've invested $40 million in our hotels so that they can get over, weather this storm. $15 million in a vitality fund that will allow us to create more jobs and excitement in DC. $5.5 million for our small business programs. We've heard just then, people around the world, of course, they want a big box experience sometimes, but they really want to know our neighborhoods and the small businesses and the unique businesses that makes us special. And we're also very committed, like Destination DC is, in investing in inclusive innovation to provide capital for our small businesses led by women and people of color. And when all of these investments come together, we know that our visitors to Washington will continue to enjoy a world-class experience. And you won't mind me saying, the best city in the world. Thank you all.
So clearly, as you listen to the mayor's excitement about our industry, she really appreciates and understands what we bring in terms of visitation to the city. You know, sometimes residents don't always appreciate people in their neighborhoods that are visitors. I think now more than ever, as we're looking at recovery, we'll welcome folks to our neighborhoods. We'll welcome them downtown. I love the jargon, big box. See how she understands what we're talking about here? I was waiting on her to say room nights and pattern and all the other stuff, but she gets it. And I was hoping you would be twinning, because I know you have a pair of these, but they're on display in your office. But we appreciate all that you and your amazing team collectively do for our industry. Thanks for taking the time to be here today and to learn a little bit more about what we're doing. So a round of applause again for the mayor. Thank you. So now as we shift, we're going to talk data. And you all know my joke about our hotels in a room. The moment we finish with data, what happens? Mass exodus. So I want you all to throw your bodies all over the doors, make sure that nobody turns off their Zoom. And I also want you to give this similar level of excitement as we introduce our next guest. You know, STR to us is extremely important because it gives us some understanding as to how we're doing as an industry, who's staying in hotels. And it's not just about hotels, but let's face it. If someone is physically staying in a hotel in Washington, they're more than likely going to eat 3 meals a day. They're going to look for a way to be entertained. They're probably going to attend meetings and maybe do some social things. So these all are important to us. And it starts with heads and beds first before we have butts and seats. So STR leads the charge in terms of that data that's extremely important to us. And I think this was flat when I said it earlier, but you know, anyone remember the movie Trading Places, Eddie Murphy, 80s? If you weren't born until 2000, and don't listen to what I'm going to say. Remember the whole pork bellies thing when they were waiting on that? You remember that? That's what this data is to us. How are we doing in the future? What to expect? So as we welcome Amanda Height to the stage, she's the president and CEO of STR, headquartered in Nashville, also on the board of the U.S. Travel Association with me, and is an amazing supporter of our industry and has the most compelling data as it pertains to our future. So a round of applause for Amanda as she makes her way to the stage.
Thank you, Elliot. I was afraid when he said the hoteliers start to leave is that you were going to say they were leaving now because they don't want to hear the data. I'll be honest, I was with you guys virtually in April. It was, not a great story in April. It's a better story today, but we do have to talk about what's happened and I'm not here to be Debbie Downer. It is reality, and you guys have been living it, but we have a really good story to tell about the future and what's coming. So to get started, I'll give you a quick overview of where things stand today in total US, just to have some perspective of as we move into the DC metro market and into the CBD, how you guys are doing in comparison to the rest of the US. So today where we stand, as of August, our RevPAR actually dropped a little in August, but that is a typical seasonal drop that we were expecting for the US, which is very different than DC had a much better August, I think, than what typically has happened. But we're returning to those normal seasonal patterns. There is some risk, and we'll talk about it in the next 20 minutes, about what happens through the fall of this year. Obviously, with variants, there has been some pullback on demand that we're starting to see in the last couple of weeks. So we do a traveler survey every few months. We have a panel of travelers that are in US, UK, Canada, and other European countries. And we ask about what's your likelihood to travel. This is leisure travelers in particular. So how do they feel about travel returning to pre-pandemic travel levels on the leisure side? So both domestic and international. It's still a negative net propensity to travel right now, and this was for July, where we stand. It actually, I would expect it to be a little stronger the next time that we survey. But I think the really positive note here is on the domestic side, 42% of travelers say they are as likely to travel in the future as they were before the pandemic. So we have seen that in the numbers over the summer. Certainly, there was a much stronger occupancy increases in the summer months than we had anticipated for the industry. So where we stand today in the US industry is 63% occupancy for August. That total room inventory occupancy there, that is a methodology we introduced last year with all of the temporary closures. So when you look at the hotels that were temporarily closed, if you treated them as open, our occupancy would be just over 62%. So not a big difference today. This was very different several months ago. We actually only have about just shy of 1% of hotel rooms in the country that are still temporarily closed. Those are concentrated in a few cities. New York, San Francisco, Orlando, DC still has a few also, but certainly San Francisco and Orlando are the markets that have the largest numbers of hotel rooms still closed. Looking at the weekly occupancies, we've been tracking this. If you follow us, I know the hotel people in the room are. Every week, we've bucketed the hotel occupancy rates into this red, green, yellow. So if you're in the red bucket, your hotels are running occupancy below 30%. In the green bucket, it's above 60% occupancy. So as you can see, during that peak summer, leisure travelers really drove those occupancy increases. We saw some big gains where we had almost 80% of hotels in a couple of weeks with occupancies over 60%. We have seen that pull back a little over the last few weeks, but the good news is those number of hotels under 30% occupancy is not growing. So this is a typical seasonal pattern that it's kind of leveling off. We call it the August slide. That happens. The real question mark is how much will the variant play into the fall meeting and business travel season. So what we're seeing as we look at day of week to really understand the individual traveler that's coming in. So we're not doing any year-over-year comparisons right now. We don't want to think about 2020, and the numbers don't even make any sense because it was so bad. So we're indexing all of this year's performance to our 2019. So 100, that dotted line across the graph there, gets us back to the 2019 performance. So you see on the weekend days in the US, we actually have been right at 2019 performance levels for demand. It's during the middle of the week that we've struggled to reach the 2019 performance levels. These are the last 7 weeks, And what you'll see on the Tuesday and Wednesday in particular is in the last couple of weeks, we started to see the demand levels drop off. And we had hoped that after Labor Day, and what would typically happen is that's when business travel starts gearing up. But what we saw the last half of August, where a lot of companies came out and said, we're going to delay going back to the office, and we're putting only essential travel in place and stopping all other travel. So we don't think that will persist forever into the fall, but certainly as case numbers were rising, hospitalizations have been rising, that is coming into play, and we know there have been cancellations in many markets. So looking at the business travel outlook from our traveler survey, it's a similar story to the leisure travel. We've got 44% of business travelers saying I'm as likely to travel for business as I was before the pandemic. And then looking here at the breakout among the countries, it really stands out for the US. Our net propensity, while it's still negative, it's only negative 19%, so much better than where Canada, the UK, or the rest of Europe stands. And I think that will continue to improve as we survey throughout the fall. The real question, though, is, will business travel ever return to the levels that we saw before the pandemic? And this is a great debate. I'll tell you, over 65% of our survey respondents say they agree or strongly agree that travel for business purposes will not return to the levels that we had before COVID-19. I personally think this is a short-term outlook. I think the response to this question is thinking about the immediate future. From a long-term perspective, I do believe that we will have business travel return to prior pandemic levels, but it's going to take several years. So in the short term, we know business travel is going to be limited because people can do Zoom meetings and team meetings, and they're not always willing to take the risk to get out there. But it's great to be in person at an event like this where you see you can meet safely, and we're demonstrating to groups that you can meet safely, you can put those precautions in place, and I think this will improve over the next couple of years. But the business travel is the risk to our forecast. This is our US forecast. We released this in August, and we upgraded the forecast, but that upgrade was not really about a much more positive outlook for the remainder of this year. It was more about the strong first and second quarter. We realized a lot more demand than we had anticipated, so we really just upgraded it based on what we had actualized. Our outlook is the rest of this year for the US, there are group meetings happening, but not anywhere near the levels that we had seen before the pandemic. We've always said 2022 is the year where we feel like the group business really starts to come back, and international. And until we get those two segments going, we will not be able to realize a full recovery for this industry. So it's going to take several years. We expect the demand in the US to return to prior pandemic levels by 2023. And it'll be 2024 before we get back to an average daily rate, or RevPAR, that we saw in 2019. So moving into the metro market, quick slide just to show you, this is how STR carves up. We've got the metro market, and then we're going to talk about the CBD in particular also. So this is occupancies for DC in relation to the top 25 markets. And you see DC metro market is there at the bottom of the list. Not surprising, you guys know it, you're living in it. It is above 50% occupancy, which is great. We have 24 of our top 25 markets in the US are experiencing more than 50% occupancy. New Orleans in August was hit with a hurricane, shut down the city for 3 weeks because there was no power, so that was really an anomaly there for the city of New Orleans. San Francisco is a market that has been at the very bottom, one of the worst performers across the country, and the slowest to come and get started on this road to recovery. They're just now starting to open up, and just last month got to that 50% occupancy level. But again, when you get down into the submarkets there, it's really tough. So coming into DC, I was in San Francisco last month, so I was happy to come into DC. It's amazing to see the leisure travelers coming back into a very urban market like DC. And the average daily rate, those leisure travelers has really helped drive the average daily rate for hotels. So DC's sort of in the middle of the pack there when you look at average daily rate, right around $125 for August, which typically in 2019 the rate was $135 for the DC metro market. So not that far off given the gap in occupancy. We've seen really nice improvement on the average daily rate side. And across the top 25 markets, you know, you've got markets like Miami and Tampa and Orange County and Nashville that are back. Even if their occupancy levels aren't back all the way, their ADRs are surpassing where they were in 2019. So that is the road that DC is on also. These are the absolute occupancies for the last year for the DC metro market. And I really just want to point out here, all the hotels have reopened. We only have 10 hotels in the metro market that are still temporarily closed. It represents about 2,500 rooms. So as all those hotels have reopened over the last 6 or 7 months, you see occupancies are climbing. Month over month, they have improved this year. Slight dip here in August, but that is expected and seasonal, and you know, moving into October is where that group business and what you heard about the meetings that are on the books for October and November that are coming into the city will really help continue to see the occupancy gains. When we look at the metro market though, in comparison to the CBD, you see the trend line for occupancy. This is weekly occupancies. The CBD trend line is very similar to the metro market, but it's pretty far below. So the recovery that we have experienced has been more outside of the CBD in the suburban markets, and we'll dive into the performance of those markets also. It's a lot of this drive to leisure destination travelers that we've seen. This 100 line is again the 2019 performance. So you see the top 2 markets there that I have highlighted, the I-95 Fredericksburg and the suburban Virginia area. Those 2 markets have consistently over the last 6 to 8 weeks outperformed 2019 in terms of occupancies. And you see the CBD there pretty far below on the index. It's below 50 on the index level to 2019 performance. But all of the submarkets here had improved in August. So that lift in August, we saw a jump there in occupancies, and certainly expect some of that to come back into the fall. The rate has been surprisingly strong. This is the average daily rate. You see the steady progression over the last 6 months. This is indexed to our 2019 performance. So for the month of August, the metro market was pretty close, right around 90 index to our 2019 performance. So even though the occupancies aren't quite back there, the ADR has been much stronger. And it's pretty even across the board as we look at the submarkets. What I want to point out here is the CBD. So while the CBD was at the very bottom, you know, only 50% of the way back to 2019 performance in terms of occupancies, in the last 7 weeks, like several of those weeks, the CBD saw average daily rates above 2019 average daily rates. So when the travelers are here, when we've got the mainly leisure travelers in hotels, rates are at a place where hoteliers are thinking about trying to drive profitability and cover the cost. One of the things that I haven't mentioned yet is the inflation. We all know inflation's running high in the US, and so while we are getting back to those 2019 levels on some weeks for ADR, they're still below the inflation level. So if you adjusted for inflation, hoteliers still aren't covering the cost, the increased cost that they have for goods and services to run their hotels. So this is our 2019 demand mix between group and transient for the metro market. So this is to show you where we are today on the group side business. So We're today in a typically one of the lowest periods for group business in the metro market, but we are entering this period where you move into some of the highest group business that you have in the market. That is the biggest risk in terms of recovery, and I'll just say, as you think about recovery, it really needs to be looking to 2022 and not between now and the end of the year. There's some business out there and there will be opportunities. It might look a little different, and we'll talk about those opportunities, but we certainly have a big hill to climb to get that group business back into the market. So where we are today on the transient side, we've sort of plateaued in the metro market the last several weeks. It's been running about 65 on the index to 2019 performance. And the group demand has been increasing every week. The last 2 weeks they've dropped off, but nothing to be afraid of because we would expect that. What's interesting is the type of groups, and the only way that we have to look at the data is by day of week to understand sort of what type of traveler it is. And the interesting thing that we've seen at a US level, and especially in the metro market here, is that as it's returned, this is our 2019 performance of weekday weekend for group. So you can see most of the group business was for, sorry, this is not 2019, this is today's numbers since June, indexed to 2019. Typically group business is during the middle of the week. That's in 2019, you see it's Tuesdays, Wednesdays, Mondays, that's where the group business is. The majority of our group business this year has been on the weekends. So it's still leisure-dominated group business that we've seen across the country and in particular in the metro market over the last 3 months. So as we think about the forecast, recovery, what's happening, pipeline certainly plays into what's going to happen for competitors. And I know you want new hotels to attract visitors, but for the hotels that are in the market, you've got to think about there's new hotel rooms opening up that you're having to compete against and try to still share from. And in the metro market, this is the total pipeline. I'm going to pay attention mostly to what's under construction because we have a lot of rooms that are in planning and final planning stages, and it's going to take those a while to move into in construction. We have seen that pipeline movement into in construction slow down just because of the downturn. People are waiting and really making sure that recovery is here before they move into that in construction phase. So the in construction phase here is in purple. So we've got about, I think Elliot said 28 hotels that are under construction in the larger market. In the CBD, there are 9 hotels that are under construction. 4 of those are scheduled to open before the end of this year. So those are rooms that will come online in a period where there's not a lot of demand coming back. It's certainly not back to your 2019 levels. So that will put some pressure on all hotels in terms of attracting demand and potentially the average daily rate, because there is this mindset of trying to drop rate to steal demand share, and there's hopefully a better discipline this time around that we've seen that we can achieve the rate. People that are traveling want to travel. You're not necessarily going to attract new travelers by cutting rates because of a global pandemic. If you're on the road, you're comfortable, they're willing to pay it, and we've seen that discipline, so we're hoping to see that continue through the end of the year. The forecast for this year for DC, this is in relation to the rest of the top 25 markets. For this year, I mean, we're talking about big growth rates because last year was our worst performance ever on record as an industry, but it's still pretty muted for the DC market. It's the 26 to 49% range for RevPAR growth. It's next year where you guys are going to see your largest gains across the board. So for 2022, we expect DC to have RevPAR growth over 50%. So this is the year, 2022 is the year to really start looking for and being excited about the opportunities that are out there to return to some normalcy. Demand will be back to 2019 levels by the end of 23, maybe the first part of 24, and it will be the end of 24, the first part of 25 before we see average daily rate or RevPAR return to our 2019 levels in the metro market. So very quickly, sorry, see, I said I didn't think I would need the back button and then I got too excited. This is the CBD market. So we talked a little bit about the occupancy. You see there has been not as quite of steady gains in the CBD market as we saw in the metro market month over month, but still positive momentum building for occupancies. And it's different. So this is 2019, June to September, highest occupancy days. And you see the green here is on Monday, Tuesdays, and Wednesdays. So we know in the DC metro market, 40% of the demand has typically come from group business and international business. And you really see that when you look at the 2019 occupancy numbers there because it's the middle of the week. So what we are seeing in the CBD now for 2021 over the last several months, you see a lot of red there in the middle of the week. The green numbers, highest occupancy days, are Friday and Saturday, even a Sunday for 1 week, which is unheard of. You know, just perspective on we've got a ways to go. The occupancy numbers, it's probably too small for you to see, but in 2019, those high occupancy days, you were looking at 96, 97, 98% occupancy during the middle of the week. These high occupancy days that the CBD is experiencing on the weekends in 2021, the occupancy rates you're talking about in the 50s, right at 60. So still a ways to go, but certainly the momentum is building, but it's with a different type of business mix than what we have typically seen in the CBD. And I think that that reflects very well what Elliot and team has done in terms of attracting all of those 50,000 people that live, I don't remember the number, but you've got those travelers who are going to drive to destinations. That's what we're seeing come into the hotels on these weekend days. This is the index back to 2019 performance, and you see how close we were for occupancies. We had Labor Day weekend, certainly for CBD, got us almost back to 2019 performance for occupancy. We had another week in the CBD where there was a citywide that got us some pretty high occupancy rates also. The average daily rate is a similar story, that it's much stronger. This is the average daily rate for 2019, weekday and weekend. So weekday rates were obviously much stronger in 2019, and because occupancies have been the strongest on the weekends this year, we see much stronger weekend average daily rate. And you see there have been multiple weeks throughout August where that weekend ADR has surpassed our 2019 performance. So that's what we have to look forward to as business continues to build over the next 6 months. And our forecast for the CBD, again, this year it's a little depressing to see a 36% occupancy rate, but you guys know it. You're doing a good job realizing the business that's here, but I think the focus is really on 22. So a 57% occupancy rate with a $103 RevPAR for 2022 still puts the CBD at a negative 40% growth rate over 2019. So it's going to be a similar story of what the metro market and the total US. You're talking about 2023, 2024 before it starts to feel like what we had before the pandemic. But we are on the road to recovery. And yes, there is uncertainty and there are things that we think that could derail it, but when we look at the pandemic, you know, I'm like Elliot on the road pretty much every week out there in the industry. We are learning how in the last month to live with this pandemic through vaccinations and safety protocols and show that we are having meetings and that people can travel. And so our outlook for the forecast is very positive in that way. Leisure travelers are still out there on the weekends. They're going to continue to supplement the occupancy rates throughout the fall. But you've got to look to 22. You know, yes, international travel will start coming back. We've got a good group business on the books. it might look a little different. And you can't, I think, making sure that the lessons that we learned over the last year of how do we attract business in sort of the worst environment, everyone got very creative and keep applying those lessons to the future. Then 2022, while not back to pre-pandemic levels, is still going to be really positive, huge growth rates for the industry in the metro market and within the CBD. Thank you for your time. My email address is on the slides that you'll have this afternoon. So if you have any specific questions I didn't cover, send me an email and we'll chat. Thank you for allowing me to be with you.
We are on a road to recovery, but destinations, beach destinations and others continue to do better. And without business travel and group business, we're still see negative numbers in terms of visitation to the city. So we're really looking forward to that coming back on track. Our next two speakers will focus specifically on that, and I'm going to introduce them together because I know we're slightly behind, but I think you need to hear from Secretary Raimondo, the Secretary of Commerce for the U.S. She's very kind with her time. She's asked me to rejoin the Travel Tourism Advisory Board that focuses on key initiatives tied to international visitation to the United States. She couldn't be here today, but she said, I wanted to do a video because I want to address my new community moving here from being the governor of Rhode Island. And she'll be followed by Tori Barnes, Executive Vice President with the U.S. Travel Association. And as you can imagine, I just got an email this morning from Tori. She lives down the street from me here on the Hill, referencing what the U.S. Travel Association is doing as it pertains to international and domestic travel. So we'll roll the video from Secretary Raimondo, followed by welcoming Tori Barnes to the stage.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you. Thank you, Elliot, for that introduction and for hosting the Destination DC Marketing Outlook meeting today. As you heard last week, the President's announcement to reopen travel in November to international visitors who are vaccinated is a huge achievement. It'll help jumpstart our economy, boost travel, and increase employment in the tourism and hospitality industries. Mayor Bowser has done a fantastic job on the vaccination front. 70% of DC residents above 18 are fully vaccinated. But we need every American to get vaccinated. Some companies have gone above and beyond the President's guidelines, mandating vaccinations for all employees. We applaud those decisions and encourage others to do the same. I know this pandemic has been brutal for the travel and tourism industry. Tourism spending in Washington alone declined by over $13 billion. This summer, travel to DC was 46% below 2019 levels. But thanks to the President's vaccination rollout and economic assistance to businesses, we are seeing a strong economic recovery. The hospitality sector has regained 79% of lost employees nationwide. Hiring in this industry has been 6 times faster than the overall economy. We're doing everything we can to get the industry back on its feet. I speak constantly with executives from airlines and the travel industry, and to make sure that your voices are heard in our meetings with the White House and the CDC and other federal agencies. We've supported international students applying for visas for the fall semester. We launched a grant program of $750 million for communities affected by losses in the travel, tourism, and outdoor recreation sector. There are 2 grant programs with flexible spending options: non-competitive state tourism grants and competitive tourism grants. We expect the state tourism grant funding to start flowing by Halloween. I'm also convening a Tourism Policy Council meeting in the fall to develop a national travel and tourism strategy. And I'm so proud of my team for ensuring that money in the Travel Promotion Fund stays available for Brand USA. On top of all of that, we're working with Senators Klobuchar and Blunt to secure additional funding for Brand USA, so America remains a top travel destination. We are making a lot of progress, but I know there's so much more to do. And I am confident that if we work together, better days will be ahead for the industry. So please stay in touch with us at the Commerce Department. We're here to support you and partner with you every step of the way. And I look forward to strengthening our engagement even more moving forward. With that, I'll turn it back to Elliot.
But you.
I have 2 headshots, and every time I choose the right outfit, I match my picture. So I didn't wear red today because normally it's that headshot. But thank you. Obviously, a huge kudos to Secretary Raimondo, but first to Elliot and Destination DC for the invitation to address you all here today. As former national chair, Elliot continues to be such an important leader in our industry for the broader challenges that the industry faces and for the recovery that we're so focused on. So grateful to be here. And a big thank you to Secretary Raimondo as well for her comments. She truly, as a former governor and as the secretary, really understands the importance of our industry, as you heard from her just now, but she has been, and her team have been tirelessly in touch with us and strong advocates. So also grateful to Amanda, President and CEO of STR, who we just heard from. It really is this partnership with the data providers that have helped give us the insights that we need throughout the pandemic. And they've really been, and Amanda in particularly, selfless in her leadership and support of the industry. So I just want to jump right in. For those of you who don't know, I think you do, but U.S. Travel is the umbrella organization for representing the travel industry across all sectors here in Washington and across the country. And there's been a lot that we've been doing to help advocate this year over the last 18 months, as always. As Secretary Raimondo and Elliot and Amanda noted, really excited about the international reopening to international visitors this November. There will be the requirement for a vaccine. Inbound folks need to have a vaccine. There will also still be a testing requirement taken within 3 days of departure. There will be enhanced contact tracing that will also be required, but there will not be a quarantine mandate, which is really critical. And this new policy, as Elliot noted, will take effect in November. We are working now with the airlines, with the agencies, with the rest of our partners to make sure that we have the right tools in place and that we can help to accelerate this recovery. As Amanda noted, we're still looking at a 2024, 2025 time horizon for recovery, but working with the Biden administration on how to accelerate this recovery has been something that's been really important for our industry and for the U.S. Travel Association. So we have all this year been articulating the need to have a data and science-driven approach to reopening. It's taken a little bit longer than we would have liked, but we're pleased because the collective voice of our industry has really allowed for an understanding on the economic consequences of not reopening. And that's really where Secretary Raimondo has come in. She has been, as noted, so critical to our ability to compel the White House that it now is the time, and the economic consequences of not reopening are far too great. We were excited to have this announcement come out at IPW, as Elliot noted last week, where we were able to have sort of the first international travel trade show in 18 months. We had 2,600 total registrants join us in Las Vegas, including 700 international delegates and 300 media. And the buzz on the floor was very positive, very optimistic. It was so great to see Elliot there, and we really believe that the positive tone and the signal that the United States made at that time was important to the acceleration of bringing folks back here. So obviously, with DC being a top destination for international visitors, this news really couldn't come soon enough. And now we really think the real work begins, at least from the advocacy standpoint. As Secretary Raimondo noted, Brand USA and the need to fund that program are critical and will be important to welcoming back international visitors here to the United States. International travel spending is obviously down, and Brand USA has been funded by international visitors who pay the ESTA fee coming into the U.S., and because they haven't been coming in, that funds are largely non-existent. So we are working with the Senate, with the House to ensure that we have, and Secretary Raimondo, to make sure we have this funding committed this year so that they can do their job. I just testified at a hearing before the Senate Commerce Committee last week, and there have been bills that have been introduced, so we are hoping that before the end of this year, Brand USA funding of $250 million will be included in a package. And then we also have a lot of other work we need to do to address the visa issues. I think those were mentioned as well. You know, student visas have been processed, but there is this tremendous backlog on international visas for folks to come into the U.S. And average wait times have skyrocketed from 3 to 5 months wait. So, you know, that was before we even had the initial lifting of these restrictions last week. And that backlog is a challenge to get through. There are some countries that have over a year wait. So we sent a letter along with 400 different organizations to the State Department. We're getting ready to reissue a new letter to the President and to the Secretary of State to ensure that they find ways to expedite these visas so that we don't have a de facto closing of that border because folks aren't able to come in because of the visa issues. And then obviously the land borders with Canada and Mexico continue to be an issue. So the announcement last week was relative to inbound travel on air travel. But the land borders remain closed, and that's costing the U.S. about $700 million a month. Those are largely logistical issues. For air travel, the airlines are currently collecting the testing requirement for folks, and they'll be ultimately the ones collecting the vaccine verification. But it's a little bit trickier on the land border because CBP isn't appropriately staffed, nor do they have a mechanism to receive those vaccine and testing credentials. So that's something that we're continuing to work on with the government to expedite those land border reopenings. And additionally, you know, obviously domestic leisure, as we heard from Amanda, as we've heard from Elliot, really can't continue to prop up both international and the lack of business meetings and events that are lagging. So we know, as Elliot and Amanda and I have all been traveling across the country and know that these meetings can be done with the right safety protocols, that we can have even larger exhibitions and events and conventions and citywides, that the right mechanisms are in place. But a lot of what's being covered by the media have been the cancellations of these types of business meetings and events. And we launched a campaign called the Let's Meet There campaign, which piggybacked off of our Let's Go There campaign earlier in the pandemic, focused on getting leisure travel back. And what the Let's Meet There campaign is doing in conjunction with the Meetings Doing Business Coalition at U.S. Travel is really highlighting how business meetings and events can be done safely, the really low risk of transmission at an event with the right protocols in place, and quite frankly, how safe it is to engage in air travel with the mask mandate, and the fact that 78% of folks that of American travelers that have traveled in the last 2 years are vaccinated. So on September 15th, we had a press conference here in DC at the National Press Club to really highlight the science and data around how safe these meetings are. Alex, I think you're the one controlling the video. If we can roll that, please.
Our combined message is very simple and compelling. The science and evidence clearly says that travel for professional meetings, events, exhibitions, trade shows, conferences, and conventions can and has safely resumed. And doing so will greatly accelerate America's economic recovery and get businesses moving forward again in a profitable way once again.
But one of the things that I think is important to realize is that among meeting attendees and business travelers, the risk, the health risk, is significantly lower than that in the general population. 92% of those with a college degree have been vaccinated in the US. And so we see that clearly as you skew toward business travel and particularly toward conventions and trade shows where higher education is a significant amount of overlap with those attendees, you're in an environment that is largely safe compared to the general population.
You may recall we had a press conference in June and we released data from the healthcare scientists at Ohio State University, which noted that professional meetings and events are not super spreader events because they are well controlled, they're monitored events that adhere to strict health and safety protocols. While the science has held true, these events are taking place because we now have much more knowledge, many more tools than when COVID first started, and it's an industry-wide commitment to make them both safe and productive.
We're not where we are in March of 2020. When you have masks, when you have vaccination coverage, you are able to have these different layers that protect against cases leaking out into the community. The events industry is actually able to lead by making these protocols in place, by getting not only the attendees behind them, but exhibitors, the staff of these events, and it's not leading to cases driving out into the community. We've already been able to see over 300 events happen safely in the United States this year alone. COVID is something that's going to need to be managed over time, the same way that flu and other epidemics have.
And we've partnered with businesses to make sure that they never shut down again. So what John said about going from epidemic to endemic, right? We can never shut down again, and we have to put the platforms in place in order to ensure that we stay open and that we stay healthy, and also bringing this to consumers and giving them the confidence to have safer and easier experiences. You think about the event experience before, it can actually come back better. And those are the partnerships that we're building nationwide, and we think it's a very important time to leverage innovation to ensure that we all meet there, we come back better.
We need the science to lead us even more to how we're going to reopen safely. We have now really good, strong modeling that allows us to adapt the measures in what we do in order for us to have safe events. So what we do is not only critical for our own industry, we absolutely believe, and we have evidence to show, that it's critical to the reopening of the U.S. economy.
Ultimately, it will be leaders of the business community who can and should usher a return to economic normalcy by getting back on the road for business travel. The meetings and conventions industry has taken the protocols. We have the ability to know who's coming in the door, who they are, what their status is, and if we do not bring back these meetings, it's just not the hotels and the convention centers, but it's all the things that happen with meetings. It's adult education, it's learning best practices, it's selling American products, and all of those things are so critical to our economy and to our communities. So I thank everyone for joining us, and I thank you for your expertise, every one of you. Thank you.
So as we saw here, we are really urging folks to highlight when healthy, safe meetings, any meetings are taking place. We really feel like it is important that we target that C-suite executive, the decision maker, that is making the decision on whether or not folks can go back to the office, whether or not folks can go back to business travel, both for transient and for business meetings and conventions. So we really have three audiences here with this campaign: the CDC, just to differentiate large meetings and events from, excuse me, mass gatherings, elected officials so that they understand the critical economic impact that these events have, excuse me, in communities across the country, and especially here in DC, and also those business meetings, business decision makers that are ultimately allowing for travel. And hopefully when they see that more of these events are taking place, they'll understand the productivity and profitability that comes with hosting these types of business meetings and events. So additionally, you can find more about that at letsmeetthere.travel. If you're interested in learning more and engaging, we'd love to have you. And then also looking ahead, a huge area of focus for us at U.S. Travel and within the travel industry is the future of travel mobility. And that aligns really with our push for greater infrastructure investment here in the United States. The United States is really neglected to invest adequately in our own travel infrastructure that's really focused on the traveler. And other countries are modernizing airports, expanding and repairing roadways, and really improving passenger rail. But we have decided we need to embrace a much bolder agenda, and that's why our country's focus on building an innovative, efficient transportation systems with the traveler in mind is so critical. Many of these policies are included in the bipartisan infrastructure package that's currently being considered before Congress, but there's still a lot more work to do. New and emerging transportation technologies will make travel even more efficient, secure, and sustainable, and really to improve the traveler experience, both for international travelers as well as for domestic and business travelers. High-speed rail, Hyperloop, and electric vehicle infrastructure are critical to the advancements in this technology. And the majority of all trips in the U.S., because they're taken by car, expanding the EV infrastructure is the only feasible way that we can really ensure the travel demand can increase sustainably. We know that auto manufacturers have made significant investments in all-electric fleets for as early as 2035, and as the travel industry contemplates our future, we really need to make sure that we're prepared to attract visitors that will be considering and prioritizing sustainable travel in the future. So next month, right here in DC at the Mellon Auditorium, we will convene global business leaders and policymakers to spotlight the future of travel, transportation, and technology. And this is an opportunity to really advance meaningful policies critical to the economic growth and long-term sustainability of our industry. This will be live streamed on October 26th. We welcome you to join and to come in person as well if you're able. We know that our industry has faced an incredible amount of challenges over the last year and a half, but we've faced setbacks before and we've overcome them. And we know that we have a lot of work to do to make sure that all sectors of our industry recover so that we can expedite the overall recovery for the United States. The policies that we're focused on will really, we think, help to increase demand, to provide job security. We know that the stability of the workforce within our industry and, quite frankly, across the country is volatile right now. So the best thing that we can do is to bring back all segments of our business to ensure that folks coming into our industry know that they have a stable environment where they can move up the ladder and have a really great future working in the travel, tourism, hospitality, and transportation sector. So thank you for all of your resilience, for your passion, for your hard work over this challenging time, and thanks to Elliot and the team for all that he and they do for Washington, D.C. As a native, I'm really proud. I was born here, one of the few, of all the great things that you all are doing in this city to bring back travel, and thank you, Mayor Bowsy, I didn't see you're still here as well, for all your incredible work. So thank you.
Thanks, Tori. Okay, 3 minutes. You heard a lot of information from the Secretary, of course, what the U.S. Travel Association is doing, and of course, the information from STR. Thank you, Amanda, for sharing. So information, but you get, it's all about telling the truth, right? So as we close, in just the next couple minutes, I do want to again thank the Capitol Turnaround. How many of you have never been in this building before? It's most of us. It's pretty cool. It started out as a car barn in the 1800s, from 1891 from 1965 to 1965, and now it's a unique space. So you heard from Eddie earlier. You should check it out. Not only the space we're in, but also the other space that's in this amazing venue. So thank you to Eddie and his amazing team for bringing us to the Navy Yard. We love going to different parts of Washington, D.C. and showcasing what we have to offer. I want to thank the Impact Collective for event planning assistance with this, Breasia for all of our AV needs. Thank you all for doing a great job. Peach Perfect for our coffee and breakfast, and today's sponsors, Expedia and Jack Nadel for the masks that we have. All the information that we shared with you, again, is going to be on the extranet. There are going to be post-Marketing Outlook meeting events with each department, marketing, convention sales, tourism, to share with you a little bit more of a deeper dive in terms of what we're doing. So please look for those dates coming your way in the near future, as we want to make sure that you know exactly how we're positioning each sector of hospitality for 2022. The key thing that we've all learned, I know the mayor has learned this, we've all learned it in terms of running our business, is that what we say on Monday might have to change by Friday because the dynamics continue to change, and that's what we focus on. That's what our board chair, Stacy Smith, and the board asks us to focus on as we look at this industry. As I close, I'm going to quickly ask members of the Destination DC team with your masks to come to the stage because I want you all to see the folks, come on. I want you all to see the folks that have really continued to work hard during this pandemic to promote DC as a destination. And as I say thank you all for being here, if the mayor has 30 seconds, maybe she can join me on stage so we can take a picture together with our masks with this amazing team that's responsible for representing all of you all. So we'll meet you in the lobby right afterwards if you want to stick around. Thank you all for your time. Thank you all for your commitment and for hosting, for being a part of Destination DC. We'll see you out there. Thank you. All right. Hey, thank you. I'm going to get the mayor and you. Come on. Thank you for staying. Thank you.